What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 121 of the Book Binge, where we're talking about a rather controversial isn't the right word, but a rather mixed reception of a book where between a number of my friends, you have ratings all the way from 5 star to 1 star and anything in between. The Road by Cormac McCarthy, or as my friends like to call it, the book that shan't be named for inside joke reasons. I said earlier this year, I'm pretty sure I probably said it one or two videos, that if I was to try reading McCarthy, that The Road would be the one that I started with. For, a couple different reasons. One, because I think it's the most well-known, the most widely read McCarthy book, and also it's also very popular. It had a very good or a very popular um, movie adaptation. That is the word. I don't know why that term just completely slipped my mind. And also because it had some comparisons to The Last of Us, which is my favorite game of all time, for a lot of reasons, mostly relating to the relationship between the father and son of the book being in some sense similar to Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us in a post-apocalyptic world. Can I say I'm satisfied with the decision to start off with this book? Well, that's kind of a different question entirely from did I enjoy it, but let's figure it out together through the review, starting off, just as always, with the good. There is some very good atmosphere and implicit sort of writing sections within the novel. It does take a while to get into, in my personal opinion, but the atmosphere and the tone of the story is definitely there, and the back half essentially has plenty of great implied world building, and that's also a very, very good part of the book as well, that I actually had much later in my notes, but realized I already had it up here. The world building of the story isn't very direct, but it is surprisingly good considering that very little of it has any form of real focus within the story. McCarthy does not tell you what happened to make the world this way, and he very often does not tell you even what the environment and the scenery is explicitly like beyond, very specific moments in scenes and in moments that are kind of fleeting in some sense. Like the passage of time isn't the most clear, for example, in terms of the seasons. You get the sense that a lot of this book takes place during winter because of the gray snow, um, and that being different from the ash that is kind of all already everywhere on the ground. But there's a lot of the world building that is both surprisingly good, but also not as good as I wish it was. This ties in with a another element that I do think is pretty good. Like I briefly mentioned earlier, I think being a really good desolate tone and atmosphere. These things kind of coincide and tie together and exist, oh, together basically, and eventually the story does become immersive as you go on. The further you read, it does become more and more so. There are aspects to character relationships that are admittedly pretty neat, though their interactions themselves aren't good. I would say the dynamic between characters are pretty good for what they are, but the interactions, especially where dialogue is concerned, is not good, in my opinion. The dialogue specifically is atrocious, and I cannot believe that anybody could say that this dialogue is good. It is so bad. No people talk to each other this way. And this disregards the fact that there isn't any proper grammar or any proper punctuation within the dialogue, so sometimes you don't know who is talking if you're not paying attention. But even with the dialogue itself, just the words being chosen for the speech is often terrible. It's just straight up not good. People almost never talk to each other this way. With that being said, though, there are a handful of scenes I actually did find fairly enjoyable. The first one of these was the scene in the bunker between the father and the son. There were the scenes basically on the beach and sort of in that similar area at near the end of the book, basically in the back third of it, I would say maybe the back quarter of it. The scene with the old man, which is also in this sort of section of the book as well, these were the only interactions between characters that I thought were actively good, between the father, the son, and the old man that they come across at one point in the story. Basically, all the other character interactions, like I said, I did not find to be very good with dialogue specifically. But there were some scenes of the book that I did think were pretty decent and did actually get, some sort of reaction out of me. The scene in the bunker, especially, is a particularly notable one, even though I didn't remember it off the top of my head when I finished the book. Just like, okay, what were a couple of the scenes that I liked? I know there was one that I actually really liked, but which one was it? And I couldn't remember it until somebody else brought it up, and I was like, oh yeah, it was the bunker, that's right. And now I remember it. But yeah, I definitely struggled with most of the book, even if there were some good portions. There were also some decently implied horror elements throughout the book as well. Some of these are halfway relatable horror, with the man's wife leaving the two of them alone. There is a little bit of a flashback section in the first third of the book that did actually feel a little bit personal and real, even though I've never experienced anything like that in my personal life. I could see how somebody else could connect to that sort of a circumstance very strongly. And then there was also some hopefully less relatable horror with the treatment of other peoples in the desolate world. Saying more than this is spoilery and actually gives away a couple of the more impactful scenes of the book, or a couple of the more horrifying scenes of the book. But yeah, there were a couple decent quasi-horror moments in the road as well. As for the bad, I also am just going to say that a lot of what I just told you was pretty good also had some bad along with it. First off, as I kind of hinted at, not just the dialogue, but the writing in general, I found to be not good. In fact, I found it to be quite bad most of the time. I'm sorry, but that's just what it is. The people who think that this prose is very good, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. I can understand why some people might like it in a sort of brutalistic or simplistic's not the right term. In a sort of bare bones kind of way, I understand how some people could enjoy it, but you can't call McCarthy's prose good because it's not. There were handfuls of sentences that were actually really good, I'll admit, but McCarthy doesn't care enough to craft his prose to actually do it consistently. If, even just half of his writing was on the tier of the best sentences of this book, I would forgive his prose, because there were a couple sentences that were like, yeah, that was actually really evocative. I see what you were doing there. But most of the time, it's bad. Obviously, in principle, like just principally, the disregard for the written language in general for a written medium just kind of pisses me off. I can't abide by the way that McCarthy just ignores punctuation, and often is inconsistent with some of it at times, and the way that he doesn't really care about grammar either. There's a lot of run-on sentences, and this book particularly had a ton of fragment sentences that were like, okay, you could have spent literally 1 second longer on that sentence and made it complete. Why? Why did you do this? And I just found it really annoying. And a lot of this was most notable for me in the first 15 to 30% of the book, which was just bad. It's not good. I said the atmosphere took a while to get into earlier. I mean it when I said it that way. The first number of sections, as the Spark Notes for the book separates the book into, I legit had to use those Spark Notes and still missed half of what it told me apparently happened in the early portions of the book. Like, not just getting into the writing, but getting into everything in the first 15 to 30% of the book. Like, I would read a section and be like, I have no clue what I even just read. What is this nonsense? And I'd read the Spark Notes for it and be like, that didn't even happen. What are you smoking? And it was just really weird to straight up have it spoon-fed to me and still not make sense. After you get beyond a third of the way through the story, it's actually much more clear, and the scenes are actually a lot easier to just know what's going on. But yeah, the first part of this book is like, just flies completely over your head, and there's no reason why it should, so that's why I include it in the bad. And lastly, even the good heartwarming moments like the bunker are weighed down by the writing. So nothing really struck me the way that it would if it was written by pretty much anybody else. The ugly for the road is going to be specifically regarding the ending. No spoilers here, I'm not going to spoil the book. But I will say a lot of people do report the ending as packing a very emotional punch, and for people who are sort of on the fence for the road, it being the thing that tips them over into really enjoying it or loving it. But I admit I did not much connect to it. There are aspects that were obviously very good conceptually, but weren't executed to what I believe were their fullest potential. A lot of this, again, because of the writing. But there were also a lot of question marks in what I felt weren't very good ways. It didn't feel satisfying to be wondering about some of the things that I was wondering about. It was like, but this didn't need to be left unanswered. And in fact, it would have been better if it wasn't left unanswered, but it was left that way anyway. And the most emotionally impactful moment of the ending was decent, and I connected to the relationship between the father and son in that moment and at a few different points, like in the bunker throughout the book. But the ending did not pack that punch like I wanted it to. It still did not do as much as I wanted based off the way that people were saying, oh, it's what made me love the book. And I was like, it wasn't even the best part of the book. Like, it's kind of middle of the road for me. And there was also an ambiguous part to the very end of the book that I'm not sure how I feel about just kind of inherently, subject matter wise. So that's where I'll leave that. As for the recommendation, personally, I don't recommend The Road. I don't recommend McCarthy if you can't abide the butchering of the written word, which is admittedly a lot of the reason why I didn't like this book and why I feel like I'm not allowed to like the book. But rest assured, the reason I'm not just going over this in terms of I dislike it because McCarthy's prose, even though McCarthy's prose is a decent bit of why I don't like it. If you watch through the whole video, obviously, there were many different things that I pointed out as being pretty good or pretty decent in the very first section of this video, or rather the review portion of this video, even if there were aspects that I didn't really like as much. If you're insatiably curious, I wouldn't discourage you from trying it if you want to read it, of course, but I don't personally recommend the book, which is, take it or leave it, I guess, is basically the way you feel. If you want to read it, read it. If you don't want to read it, don't. It doesn't really matter to me either way. I'm not going to urge you one way or the other, even though I personally did not like it. And again, I should clarify as well, part of this is also because if I were to go onto my Goodreads right now and look at all of my friends' ratings, I'm pretty sure the average rating would be like 3.5 or something, with some people rating it as high as 5, some people as low as 1, but most people rating it like 3 is kind of where most of my friend group lies, is like right in the middle. I leaned more negative than 3. A couple of my friends leaned more positive, but for the most part, it's like one of those love it or hate it books, or you're just, well, it's one of those like fence sitter books, and then there might be something specific that tips you over one way or the other. For me, the writing tipped me over in the negative direction, whereas a lot of people like the ending tips them over in the positive direction, if that makes sense. Either way, over the years, I think I will try a couple more of McCarthy's books, probably No Country for Old Men next, and then maybe the Border trilogy after that, as those are the ones that a lot of my friends have mentioned are like some of the most approachable ones besides The Road, and are also of pretty high quality comparatively speaking. So the fact that they're not just inherently recommending me to read Blood Meridian next just because that's the one that everybody in my friend group already knows about as well, has me a little bit more encouraged. They're kind of giving that recommendation to me personally as like a, here are the ones that you might be a little bit more into if you were to try them next, rather than a read Blood Meridian because reasons type of thing. So I do think I will try more McCarthy over the years, and for some reason, even though I did have a pretty bad experience with The Road, I am morbidly curious, and for some reason have a really weird desire to read all of McCarthy's books. I have no idea why, and I don't know why I would put myself through that torture if it turned out I just did not like McCarthy at all, but for some reason, I just have this drive to want to do that for some reason. But either way, I'm not sure if McCarthy will be for me. And a lot of that is because of the reading experience of The Road. But regardless, I think I've rambled enough about this book as is. Thank you guys for watching. If you did, I'll be back this Thursday with probably another Wheel of Time diary, but my next review will be next Tuesday on the book that is sitting right back there, which I'm going to be recording immediately after I'm done recording this. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, I'll see you guys in the next video.